Welcome to this special episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. It's with immense pride and gratitude that I'm with you here today, marking over 100 episodes of the Good Leadership Podcast, which have been filled with meaningful conversations on leadership, personal growth, and the ever-evolving landscape of leadership. Over the course of these 100 episodes, we've had conversations with well-known and influential thought leaders and experts sharing valuable insights that have inspired you, our listeners, to lead with more purpose and passion. My goal and overriding focus for each episode is to provide you with valuable insights while serving up practical tips, tools, and techniques you can use right away. In this episode, we'll be revisiting some of the most profound lessons and game-changing strategies that have emerged from the last 100 episodes. As we embark on this journey today, let's remember that leadership is not just about titles and positions. It's about influencing positive change, inspiring others, and making the world a better place. I'd love to hear from you. What leadership topics have resonated with you the most? Which guests or discussions have left a lasting impact? Reach out to me on social media using the hashtag 100GoodLeadership and share your thoughts and feedback. All right, let's get this episode started with Dr. B.J. Fogg, who is a leading figure in behavior change and is the founder and director of the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University, along with being a New York Times bestselling author of my favorite book on habit change, Tiny Habits. He's also an innovator in this space. And part of this interview that we're going to share today with BJ is he's going to share his insights on how to improve your success in developing new habits by focusing on this.
Look at any behavior that you want to make more common in your life and spend 3 minutes saying, how do I make this easier to do? Don't worry about how do I motivate myself to do it more. That's just one component. Go to the ability. How do I make it easier? And list ways to make it easier. You don't have to spend 3 hours, 3 minutes. You might, in 30 seconds, have some great answers. And then start making it easier to do. And in that way, you could start playing around with your own behavior. In other words, being like a scientist of your own behavior. And you're going to see the power of one, being deliberate in the design, and two, how simplicity changes behavior. So that's probably the simple, practical thing I would suggest.
I get this question quite a bit from leaders. I just wish I knew I was on the right path. As Dorie Clark, New York Times bestselling author and one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world, mentions, there are always small, quiet indicators of progress that often go unnoticed by us.
What I call looking for the raindrops. Because the truth is, on the way to success, on the way to eventual success, there are these sort of small, quiet indicators of progress. And it's very easy for busy people with their eyes on the prize to overlook them and to say, well, that doesn't count, or, oh, that's not a big deal. But we shouldn't write them off because those are the signs that we're moving in the right direction. And it could be anything from, starting to get more inquiries about, oh, can you speak? I mean, even if they're free speeches, even if they're for places you would never want to speak, just the fact that they're reaching out says, oh, well, people are paying more attention. Or, maybe it's, unsolicited compliments from clients, or maybe you're starting to get more LinkedIn requests because more people are aware of you. All of those things are small, but it shows you're moving in the right direction. And those are the things that we need to attune ourselves to if we're going to be able to master strategic patience.
This next piece of advice comes from best-selling author and recognized thought leader Todd Henry, who states everyone wants to be known for something. In other words, they want to be the noun, but no one wants to be the verb, the doer of something.
Billy Joel was given a talk, I think at Vanderbilt University, and this guy stood up and he said, hey, I want to play New York State of Mind with you. And Billy Joel's like, yeah, okay, come on up. And he's like, what instrument do you play? He's like, piano. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, you're here with like one of the greatest living pianists, right here. And yet you're gonna, and so he did. He sat down and he just absolutely killed it. And it turns out the guy every single day was working on and playing and practicing every single day, including that song, right? That was like one of the songs that he practiced over and over and over again. So he was ready. In the moment when it came, he was ready to deliver. I always tell people who aspire to be public speakers in some capacity, and I've given talks in front of everywhere from a couple dozen people to like 400,000 people, right? Like on stages that are like smaller all the way up to like giant, huge auditoriums with 10,000 people in it. And what I always tell people who aspire to speak in some capacity is you should be ready at a moment's notice to give a 30-minute speech. If somebody tapped you on the shoulder, you should be able to get up right now and give a 30-minute speech. and a good 30-minute speech. If you can't do that, then you're not serious about wanting to be a public speaker. You're not serious about wanting to really transform lives through your speaking. You're just not. Because that's what a good public speaker does. If you're waiting for somebody to tap you on the shoulder to figure out what you might want to say, not good enough. So you have to stay battle ready. You have to be ready to go. I am constantly developing ideas, communication methods, stories, ways of innovating. And I mean, it's really primarily like, we want to be the noun. That's what Austin Kleon says. We want to be the noun, but we don't want to do the verb, right? So we want to be a leader, but we don't want to lead. We want to be a writer, but we don't want to write. We want to be a speaker, but we don't want to speak, or we don't want to like work on the craft of it, right? Or whatever it is. We want to be an entrepreneur, but we don't want to engage in entrepreneurial behaviors that lead to ultimately success as an entrepreneur. We have to be willing to do the verb if we want to be the noun. And the verb is way more important than the noun. Gretchen Rubin said, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. So you have to be willing to do those things every single day. Even when you're not seeing results, do the things every single day for a really long time to position you to be battle ready when your moment comes.
Next, I wanted to share some insights on goal setting from a few of my favorite guests. The first insight comes from Jeff Hayden, contributing editor of Inc. magazine and LinkedIn influencer, who states that goals should inform the process of where you want to go.
The idea for goals, people will often say that, you need to pick your goal, you need to put it on a big banner, you need to look at it all the time because that's going to motivate you or whatever else it is. But to use the marathon example you just did, if you're starting from zero and you're looking at 26 miles on the wall, the idea that you have to actually do that, it's not inspiring, it's daunting. And so your goal, you do need a goal, clearly, and it can be a huge goal, but then that goal should just inform the process that you create in order to get to where you want to go. And so early on, that process may just be, I will go run a mile today. And that's a good thing, because if you run your mile today, you can Jerry Seinfeld check the X off the calendar because you wrote a joke today, and you can say, I did it. You can feel good. For that day, you get to feel good because you did what you set out to do.
Next is Dr. Ruth Gotten, who has researched some of the most successful people in the world in order to learn their practices. And in this next clip, she explains to us the type of goals high achievers typically focus on.
So it's not about that long-term goal. And I think that we have learned during the pandemic that goals change and our purpose changes. And that's why that passion audit is so important to do when we have transitions in our lives. A new partner, a new job, a new move, a new child, a pandemic. These are all things that cause us to reevaluate what's truly important and what we enjoy doing. And that's why so many people actually left their jobs at the peak of the pandemic. So I always recommend that people do that passion audit during the transition. So what we've learned during the pandemic is that your long-term goals may no longer be relevant because you've had a transition in your life. How can your goals at 40 be the same goals you had when you were 20? They shouldn't be. They absolutely shouldn't be. That's why you always need to reevaluate. So yes, I have my goals to complete by 2025 on a Post-it note, but I also have, and a question I always ask people is, what is your next goal? And this is very important. If you are a junior person in your organization, you're not going to be CEO, right? There's about 20 steps in between. So what is your next goal? Now, what are 2, 3, 4, 5 things you need to do in order to make that next goal happen? Once you start breaking it down into these tiny little steps and you start working on those steps, you will see that you will meet that next goal ahead of schedule. And then there's another one right behind it.
Now, the first 100 episodes have included lots of productivity tips, so I wanted to include in this episode a few of my personal favorites. Leading off will be Helene Segura, who explains her 3+3 technique.
It is figuring out what are the top 3 priorities you truly need to focus on and get accomplished the next day. And do we have more than 3 things to do? Of course, we have lists a mile long. But that old saying, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority, that's really true. And your brain needs help in what to focus on. So when you choose what your focus is going to start with the next day, then your brain is already working on fire as soon as you kick off the workday the next day. So your first 3 would be the top 3 priorities. Your plus 3 is moving down your list. So you chose 1, 2, 3. Now you're actually moving into 4, 5, 6. So that would be your plus 3. The next 3 levels of priorities. And you choose those for 2 reasons. Number 1, it could be a bonus. So let's say all the stars align and you actually get to finish those top 3 priorities because everybody got you what they needed to. After you do your little happy dance, then you can move into the plus 3. So that way you can continue being productive, continue achieving, checking off those high priorities. Or what tends to happen quite often is instead of the bonus 3, it's actually a backup 3 because there is a hitch with something you're trying to accomplish from the top 3. There's nothing you can do about it. And when we get into these situations and negativity starts to infuse our brain and drag us down, we tend to go after low-hanging fruit, which is not a great thing. So that's why if you've chosen your backup 3, after you throw a little tantrum, decompress a little bit, then your brain can get refocused faster so you can continue working on higher level priorities instead of the not so important things.
I hear lots of leaders asking at the end of the day, did I get enough done? And according to Juliet Funt, the tough love advisor to the Fortune 500, that's the wrong question to ask yourself. Instead, you should have a results-only work environment so that you're asking questions like, what are the results we care about? And are we delivering on those results? One of the questions that you state in your book is the wrong question to ask yourself at the end of the day, at the end of the week is, did I do enough?
Yes, that's the additive question, that question that has to do with the first 3 factors that you wanted me to highlight. Insatiability. The 3 together are insatiability, conformity, and waste. These are the 3 things that weigh down human beings at work, and we can go through all 3 of them. But insatiability is always whispering in your ear things that have to do with quantity. Did you get enough done? How many boxes did you check? How many hours did you work? Insatiability really has no ability to determine high value versus low value work. It's just looking at the size of the pile. And it has infected a lot of the way that workers think about their value. And it's infected a lot of the ways that bosses think about the value of the worker. That's why we have these nanny cam situations or keeping the camera on all the time where people are afraid that there is a stepping away. A beautiful contrast to that we write about in the book is called ROWE. I don't know if you remember the term, results only work environment. That's the absolute opposite of a quantity-based value system where you say to yourself, as a leader or as an executive team, what are the results that we care about?
Now, let me give you some advice about giving advice. And we start this section with Dr. Debbye Turner Bell, who provides us a better way to receive feedback. One technique that I found to be helpful is not calling it feedback, but calling it advice and being specific with that advice so that they don't feel like they're going down that path of giving you feedback that you may not want to hear and they may put you at odds with them. Any tips that you might have to help our listeners kind of build that feedback muscle to become more powerful communicators?
Absolutely. And I love your technique. And I have one that's very similar. Instead of asking, okay, so give me your criticism, what did I do wrong? Position it, reframe it, and say, the next time I do this, what else should I do? Or what should I do differently? You put it in the affirmative, put it in the positive, and often that makes people more comfortable in giving you, real honest feedback as opposed to criticism. And there's a difference.
The second clip is with Deborah Grayson Riegel, who emphasizes the importance of giving actionable feedback.
We need to keep in mind that behavior change is really hard, right? So for anybody who has ever tried to quit smoking, lose weight, and start running, chances are they did somewhere between 1 and 0 of those things when they tried to take on 3. So if you are giving people lots and lots of feedback, make sure that it is something that feels important and actionable that they can use again. And just because you've got feedback in your mind doesn't mean that you have to give it. And if there isn't an opportunity for them to apply this feedback that you see coming up, you may want to exchange it for a piece of feedback that's more actionable and more pressing.
So now you may be asking, what great advice do I have in dealing with difficult people or having tough conversations? Well, let's get that conversation started with Alisa Cohn, who discusses the mindset you should have before heading in to one of those difficult conversations.
You approach somebody and you might know, oh, we're about to have a difficult conversation, or it might just spring up like, oh, wait, what happened here? I like to tell all my leaders. So again, it starts with you. I like to tell all my leaders, it's like the thunderstorm, thunder, 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 thunder. It's not going to hurt you and it's going to be over. And so you want to have enough perspective with somebody who is having, let's say, a really heated moment with you. And then only then, and I would also say maybe get curious right there and then, like, this person is overreacting. I wonder why. Or, I can understand why. This is a very difficult thing we're talking about. I can understand why this person is overreacting. So all of that happens before you say anything, right? But then once you're curious, once you recognize it was just a thunderstorm, it's not going to hurt you and it's going to be over, you can then address this person, which would be like, listen, I don't want to overly upset you. And there's some serious things we absolutely need to talk about. We need to talk about them either today or we can talk about them tomorrow or the next day, but one way or the other, absolutely these things we have to talk about. And ultimately, I want for the good of you and the company and all of our teammates. So we need to come to a decision and to a resolution that's going to take all of that into account.
Next is Neil Staker, who provides some great insights into the signs that we should be paying attention to in our conversations that commonly indicate escalating conflict.
My subtlest form of escalation is a lack of questions. If you've got people that are genuinely trying to understand and find solutions, they're going to ask questions to help them understand. When people shift from asking questions to only explaining why their viewpoint or their side is right, then you know that you're starting to escalate. And then the language becomes more forceful. You start hearing some obvious ones like, well, yeah, but, and they're going to interrupt each other. You're also going to hear some things like, well, everybody knows that. And you always say that. So you're going to start hearing some absolutes, and it might even escalate to labeling. That's an optimistic assessment, or you're not foolish enough to believe those numbers, are you? Now I'm starting to kind of impugn your character, your mental ability. And so it tends to escalate through a series of a lack of questions to forceful, convincing language, and all the way up to labels, where we're labeling people's ideas and ultimately labeling them themselves. So the sooner you notice, the better. Once you do notice, the best thing is just to go public with it. One of the best examples I ever saw, we kind of have this phrase that we like to use that if you name the game, you don't have to play it. So we actually saw somebody that was known as being really aggressive and kind of a bully in the organization. They were talking in a hallway and he started leaning in, and he was a big guy and he was leaning in on this little guy. And the little guy said, as we're talking, you're leaning in towards me and you're a lot taller than I am. It almost looks like you're trying to intimidate me by your size. What does the big guy do? Oh, I'm sorry. And he steps back. If you name the game, you don't have to play it. So if it starts escalating and you kind of do a timeout, and you say, guys, we need to stop here. It's like, I'm seeing people that a minute ago, we were asking honest questions, and now we're using words like it's obvious that, and everybody knows. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody else, but this path doesn't take us anywhere. Let's take a step back. We can agree to find something that works for all of us, or at least to try to understand where we're coming from.
The next clip in this section is with Michael Bungay Stanier, who describes the 4-step framework to keep calm during conflict. You have a great model by John Boyd in the book. He was an Air Force colonel, and it's observe, orient, decide, and act, because a lot of time when we're in the middle of conflict or just in a relationship that needs maintenance, that we can't separate the facts from the opinions, from the feelings. It's really hard to do that. But this model really puts it in the right context for us to kind of differentiate the three so we can see things clearly.
Yeah, so he was a Air Force colonel who became famous for being a pain in the neck. He never got promoted beyond colonel because he was like, I don't care, but being a brilliant fighter pilot because he had this ability in the heat of battle to keep a cool head. And when he was asked how to do it, he kind of came up with this way of thinking, which is like, you orient, you find the best place to sit or stand or be, you observe, you notice what's going on, then you decide, and then you act. But of course, part of the challenge is that we are flooded by all of the stuff that's going on in conflict. We've got feelings, that's kind of making us filled with stuff. We've got judgments and opinions and interpretations of what's going on. And somewhere buried underneath all of this is the actual facts. And so the connection to Orion is to sort of go, what do you know to be true? What are the facts? What's amazing is there's always far fewer facts than you think there will be. And then you go, and what are my opinions about all the facts? And you've got a ton of judgments, and they come intermeshed with feelings as well. So if you can pull all those apart, if you understand what the facts are, how you're feeling about the facts, what your judgments are about the facts, and why that's influencing your feelings, you're going to have a cooler head in terms of deciding what you want or what you need as a next step.
Now let's transition into a few tips for women leaders. And it is only fitting we start with Sally Helgesen, who was ranked by Forbes as a #1 coach for women leaders. She provides some great advice on overcoming the imposter syndrome.
I think the imposter syndrome happens because we're not accustomed to doing these things. So the imposter syndrome begins to dissipate as we get more comfortable doing something that may feel inauthentic or not like us because we haven't done it in the past. That's the best way to address the imposter syndrome. It really is with action, not with more ruminating and thinking about, oh, I have the imposter syndrome. Let me read 6 books about people with the imposter syndrome. No, start doing something that feels a little counterintuitive that can be helpful. And then you get used to it, and you don't, after you've done it for a bit, you don't feel like an imposter doing it.
This next clip is taken from my conversation with best-selling author and women's leadership guru, Dr. Jeanne Porter King, on how gender bias shows up in the workplace and what we can do about it.
I talk about taking teachable moments. And a teachable moment is when we see that someone has been a subject to that double bind that you just described. That's a double bind. An outspoken woman is considered to be aggressive. A man doing the same thing is not held to that same standard, is not seen as aggressive. We see that happening. It is an opportunity for us to have the conversation and have a teachable moment. What did she do that made her seem to be aggressive? And would you describe a man doing the exact same thing as aggressive? And if not, let's unpack why that is. Let's define aggressiveness and assertiveness. In interpersonal behavior, aggressiveness is about asserting power over another, not hearing the other's voices, over talking, or shutting others down. It's, again, I respect my power, but I don't respect yours. Assertiveness just says that I respect my power and I respect your power, and I have the right to assert an opinion and you have the right. So I don't overpower you, but we develop power together. We use a power with approach, if you will. And so that's a good test that we often can use for a teachable moment to really help define aggressiveness and show how the gender bias shows up.
Let's now move into personal branding. And I get these questions frequently from leaders. How can I build my personal brand, and what are the steps? I love what branding expert Lida Citroen states as one of the questions everyone should be asking themselves in building their brand.
Everything you do and are makes you a brand. So every way you speak about yourself and others, every way you act around other people and online, every relationship that you announce reflects who you are and what you stand for. So don't become paranoid, but become mindful and thoughtful about it. If you're about to hit send on an email, ask yourself, is this on brand for me? Am I representing myself the way that I want to be perceived? Before you post on social media, before you stand up and offer your opinion in a meeting, ask yourself this. Start getting in the habit of asking yourself, is this on brand for me? If somebody were to look at this action or this communication or this relationship and judge me by it, which we know they're going to, would they come to the right conclusion about who I am and what I stand for?
This next clip is from my interview with one of the pioneers in this space, William Arruda, who discusses the 3 phases of brand development. Let's move into the 3 stages of building a powerful brand, because those are really informative to know. The first phase is undifferentiated, second phase is distinguished, and the third phase is demanded. Let's focus first on that. Undifferentiated, you aren't a brand right now, you're more of a commodity, right?
That's exactly it. It means you can do everything that's required to do your job, right? You're totally fine at what you do, but every interaction you have is a transaction, right? And you're constantly rebuilding connections and whatnot. There's nothing that makes you stand out and gets people excited about you. But this second phase, right, distinguished, this is a good place to be, because it means not only can you tick the box next to everything required to do your job, but there's something valuable, unique, interesting that you offer in addition. That creates a little bit of a fan club. People are like, oh yeah, you got to meet Charles, right? And there's something amazing about him. And then people tell us what that is. And that's a good place to be. Not as good is in that third category, which is really where you become a brand in demand. It means that your fans are actually promoters now. They're telling the rest of the world how absolutely incredible you are, why you need to work with them. And your brand starts to take on a life of its own. And that gives you this attraction opportunity where things come to you, right? Because you're the person that people want to work with, because you offer something that's only available from you. And that's where we all want to be, right? No one should be looking for, whether they're inside a company or they want to move somewhere else, no one should have to go out and look for that job. You should build your brand such that that job or that opportunity inside your company comes to you.
Another topic I wanted to make sure we covered in this episode is strategic thinking. I found that many leaders are confused around what strategic thinking actually is and how it's different from strategic planning. Instead of providing this explanation, I thought I would turn it over to recognized expert in this space from Columbia University, Dr. Juliet Sloan.
For strategic planning, what we really want to keep a tight focus on is things that I can control. For strategic thinking, because of the nature of strategic thinking, we want to pay attention to things I cannot control. Okay. And you look at the environment today that is filled with complex problems. We need to focus on what can't I control and realize that from a strategic perspective, it's usually the stuff that we can't control that are going to pull out the rug from us from a strategic perspective. Things that I can control, that I slip up on, that I forget about, that I make a mistake on, those are usually correctable. We can usually rectify those things. But it's the things that I cannot control, like, for example, forest fires, an economy that you have absolutely no control over, social unrest that can upset and impact everything else, political unrest and political discord that impacts the economy, that impacts social issues, that impacts just about everything else. These are things I can't control. These are things no business leader can control. But these are the things that can undermine and really pull the rug out from us from a strategic perspective. So we need to give time to these sorts of things, even though at the time it may seem like a far-fetched conversation where people roll their eyeballs and think, oh, we'll never have a hurricane here. Oh, we'll never have a tornado. We'll never have a tsunami. We'll never have. These are the things that can really wreak havoc on a business because we haven't considered them. So that's why it's important as an attribute to be able to develop an ability to use our imagination to diverge an issue and to say, well, what could happen?
The next segment I wanted to select for this special episode is with someone I've had on the podcast multiple times, Professor Michael Roberto, who is a Harvard-educated professor that specializes in strategy. He provides a great example of a company that has leveraged strategic trade-offs to become very successful. Because quoting Dr. Roberto, the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do.
If you think about Trader Joe's, you can make a giant list of the things they don't do that a conventional supermarket does. They don't sell many branded goods. They don't have big parking lots and wide aisles. They don't have self-checkout. They don't do a lot of social media. They don't have anything on sale ever. They don't do coupons. They don't have a loyalty card. What kind of grocery store is this? No loyalty card, crowded parking lots. Oh, they have a limited selection. They only have like 3,000 or 4,000 items in the store. Most have 40,000. Who wants to go to this store? Well, the answer is, they have rejected a lot of the aspects of the conventional wisdom. But what they have done is create an amazing user experience that's very unique. They've created this treasure hunt in the store that people love, this curated selection of quirky items, and it's going there as a process of discovery. Right? It's this treasure hunt that customers love. But the key is that by making all those trade-offs, it's very difficult for the conventional supermarkets to imitate them. Because if, as an example, if here in the Northeast, we have one of the big conventional chains is Stop and Shop. They're owned by a European holding company. And there are conventional supermarkets. So they've got these massive stores, huge footprint, huge parking lots, massive numbers of self-checkout lanes. They've got a loyalty card program. They have 40,000 items or SKUs in their store. If they look and go, oh, Trader Joe's is making more money than us. But how can they imitate Trader Joe's? They can't undo all these commitments they've made. We like to say that companies, when they build a strategy, they make commitments, physical, financial, human commitments that are rigid. A good strategy takes advantage of the rigidities of your competitors, and making trade-offs, sharp ones, can often take advantage of those rigidities. So Trader Joe's is an example where it's hard for others to imitate because they've rejected a lot of the traditional notions of what grocery should mean and built what I might call the anti-grocery store.
Before we end this episode, I wanted to share two of my personal favorite insights. The first one is on gratitude and simple ways we can show it every day from the guru of gratitude, Chester Elton.
Yeah, develop your own personal little rituals. I've got a fun one. I carry around these little gratitude stones in my pocket. And I just look for people that are doing a great job, whether it's the waitress at the diner, the guy at the car wash. I was at a hockey game the other day. It was a cold night, and you've got all the police officers that are holding the traffic so the fans don't get run over. I mean, it is Jersey, right? And I said, officer, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it. I come to the Rock all the time, and you always keep us safe. So I've got a little token of gratitude for you. It's a little gratitude stone. And you'd think, Charles, I was giving him a Fabergé egg, right? And I said, it's a stone because when you throw a stone in the pond, the water ripples, just like gratitude. So whether it's you're writing 3 thank you notes a week, or you give a little gratitude stone, or you have a morning text that you send out to your people with a little positive affirmation, develop a little ritual and stick to it. My mantra every time I get up in the morning is be kind, be grateful, and be of service. Because I know if I can be in that mindset, I'm going to have a good day.
The final clip for this special episode is from my interview with thought leader Paul McGee, who gives some great advice on how to live your life with radical amazement. I hope you enjoy.
Jewish philosopher and theologian Abraham Heschel, and he just said this: our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. And then I add up to that something I've come across. You might not be aware of it, but most of us have encountered the 7 wonders of the world. Really, we have. Those 7 wonders are to see, to hear, to touch, to taste, to feel, to laugh, to love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this special episode of the Good Leadership Podcast as we revisited some of the great insights, strategies, and techniques that we were shared with some of my amazing guests over the first 100 episodes. As we conclude this episode, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you, our dedicated listeners and supporters who have made this podcast a success. Your passion for leadership and your commitment to personal and professional growth inspire me daily. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Good Leadership Podcast so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep engaging with us on social media using the hashtag 100GoodLeadership. We'd love for you to share your thoughts and feedback. And as you continue in your own leadership journey, I will leave you with this simple yet profound piece of advice that I like to end every episode with, which is, it is not what you know that counts, but what you do consistently that makes a difference. Thank you.